My GF's jewelry is cursed. AITA. It started with the locket. Sarah's grandmother, Margaret, had passed away after a long battle with, well, everything. Old age is a real bastard. Sarah was understandably devastated. They were close. Margaret had practically raised her while her own parents were busy chasing promotions and corner offices. The funeral was small, just family and a few of Margaret's longtime friends from the little town of Havenwood, Vermont, a town that looked like it was ripped straight from a Norman Rockwell painting. If Norman Rockwell had a secret room full of cobwebs and unsettling antiques. After the service, the lawyer read the will. Nothing too dramatic. Sarah got the house, a small sum of money, and all of Margaret's personal effects, including her jewelry collection. The house wasn't worth much, a rambling Victorian on the outskirts of town that needed more work than it was probably worth. But the jewelry, that was something else. Margaret had kept it locked away in a heavy oak chest in the attic. Sarah, Ellie her best friend since kindergarten, and I spent the better part of an afternoon lugging the damn thing down the creaky attic stairs. When we finally got it open, I have to admit I was impressed. It wasn't gaudy or flashy. It was old, really old. Victorian cameos, heavy silver bracelets engraved with symbols I didn't recognize, rings set with stones that looked like they'd been plucked from the eyes of ancient statues, and the locket, a silver heart tarnished with age, etched with vines and tiny, almost imperceptible faces. Sarah was mesmerized. She picked up the locket, her eyes shining. She wore this all the time when I was little, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I used to ask her to open it, but she never would, said it was too fragile. I'm a software engineer. Logic is my bread and butter. Sentimentality, not so much. I saw a bunch of dusty old trinkets that probably needed a good cleaning and appraisal, but I also saw how much it meant to Sarah, so I kept my mouth shut. That night, Sarah decided to wear the locket. She said it made her feel closer to her grandmother. I thought it looked nice on her, even if it was a little gothic. That's when things started getting weird. The first night, it was just the lights flickering. Our house, freshly renovated, mind you, has brand new wiring, so it was strange. I chalked it up to a power surge or something. Then the next morning, Sarah couldn't find her keys. She swore she'd left them on the kitchen counter, but they were nowhere to be seen. We eventually found them in the freezer. We both laughed it off. But then, the nightmare started. Sarah would wake up screaming, her eyes wide with terror. She couldn't remember the dreams, just a feeling of overwhelming dread and darkness. She started sleepwalking too. One night I found her standing in the backyard, staring up at the moon, wearing nothing but her pajamas and the locket. I was starting to get worried. Ellie suggested she see a therapist. I agreed, but Sarah refused. She said the dreams were just stress related to her grandmother's death and settling the estate. She said she was fine, but she wasn't fine. The incidents escalated. Doors would slam shut on their own. We'd hear whispers in the dead of night, just barely audible, like someone was trying to talk to us from another room. Objects would move around the house. Nothing major, just small things like a book ending up on a different shelf or a picture frame tilting on the wall. I started to suspect the house itself. Maybe the renovations weren't as good as I thought. Maybe there were hidden problems, structural issues we hadn't uncovered. But then, Ellie had her little accident. We were all having dinner at our place. Ellie was telling us about a new art project she was working on with her students. She was laughing, animated, when suddenly she choked. She started gasping for air, her face turning red. Sarah jumped up and started performing the Heimlich maneuver, but it didn't work. I was about to call 911 when, finally, she coughed up a small piece of food. She was okay, shaken, but okay. But later she told Sarah that she had this overwhelming feeling, right before she choked, like someone was pushing down on her chest, preventing her from breathing. That's when I started to think it wasn't the house. It was the jewelry, specifically the locket. Sarah had been wearing it every day since her grandmother's funeral, and all the weirdness had started around the same time. I started doing some research online. I know, that's always a bad idea, but I was desperate. I searched for anything I could find about antique jewelry, curses, hauntings, anything that might explain what was happening. I found a few obscure forums dedicated to the paranormal. One user mentioned something about sympathetic resonance, the idea that certain objects could absorb and amplify negative energy. Another talked about spirit attachments, where spirits could latch on objects and influence the people who wore or possessed them. It all sounded like a bunch of new age woo-woo to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something to it. I decided to dig deeper into Margaret's past. Sarah didn't know much about her grandmother's life before she moved to Havenwood. Margaret was always a bit of a recluse, never talked much about her family or her early years. I started by looking through Margaret's old papers and documents. I found some old photographs, mostly faded snapshots of Margaret as a young woman. There were pictures of her with other people, but I didn't recognize any of them. They looked different. Their eyes seemed to stare right through the camera with a chilling intensity. I found a few letters, too. They were written in a spidery, almost illegible handwriting. The letters were addressed to Margaret from someone named Elias. The language was flowery and dramatic, filled with cryptic references to the old ways and the power of the bloodline. The more I read, the more uneasy I felt. It was like I was uncovering a secret history, a dark chapter in Margaret's life that she had desperately tried to keep hidden. I went to the Havenwood Town Library. Sarah, bless her heart, helped me before things got really weird. I spent hours combing through old newspapers and town records, searching for anything about Margaret or her family. I found nothing. It was like she had materialized out of thin air when she moved to Havenwood. Frustrated, I decided to ask around town. I started by talking to some of the older residents, the people who had known Margaret the longest. Most of them didn't remember much about her. She was just that quiet woman who lived out on the edge of town. But then I talked to Arthur Pembroke. Arthur was an antique dealer. He ran a small, dusty shop on Main Street, filled with oddities and curiosities from all over the world. He was an old man with a wispy white beard and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was also rumored to be a bit of a local eccentric, with a deep knowledge of Havenwood's history and folklore. I showed him a picture of the locket. His eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice raspy. I told him it belonged to Sarah's grandmother. He shook his head slowly. "That locket, it's been in Havenwood for a long time, longer than you think." He told me a story about a family that had lived in the area centuries ago. They were wealthy and powerful, but they were also rumored to practice dark magic and engage in pagan rituals. The family had eventually disappeared, vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and legends. "That locket," Arthur said, "it was said to be a symbol of their power, a conduit to other forces." He warned me to be careful. He said that the locket was dangerous, that it could bring nothing but misfortune and sorrow. He told me to get rid of it, to destroy it if necessary. I went home and told Sarah everything. She didn't believe me. She said I was being ridiculous, that I was letting my imagination run wild. She said the locket was just a sentimental keepsake, a reminder of her grandmother's love. I tried to reason with her, to explain the things that had been happening, but she wouldn't listen. She was becoming increasingly attached to the locket, wearing it constantly, even when she slept. I was starting to lose her. She was becoming withdrawn, secretive, almost distant. She would spend hours staring into the mirror, her fingers tracing the etchings on the locket. I would ask her what she was doing, and she would just say, "I'm listening." One night I woke up to find Sarah gone. I searched the house, but she wasn't there. I went outside and found her in the backyard, standing by the old oak tree, wearing nothing but a long white gown and the locket. Her eyes were closed, and she was chanting something in a language I didn't understand. Her voice was low and guttural, like it was coming from someone else. I tried to approach her, but she lashed out, pushing me away with surprising strength. Her eyes snapped open, and they were wrong. They were black, empty, devoid of any humanity. "Leave me alone," she hissed. "I'm almost there." I stumbled back, terrified. I didn't know who this person was, but it wasn't Sarah. I ran back inside and called Detective Miller. He was a local cop, a good guy, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. I told him Sarah was acting strange, that she might be having some kind of mental breakdown. I didn't mention the jewelry or the curses or the dark magic. I knew he'd think I was crazy. Miller arrived a few minutes later. We went outside, but Sarah was gone. We searched the yard, but she was nowhere to be found. "She probably just went for a walk," Miller said. "She'll be back." But I knew she wouldn't. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah, about the look in her eyes, about the chanting. I knew something terrible was about to happen. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went back to Arthur Pembroke's shop. I told him what had happened, and he nodded grimly. I tried to warn you, he said. That locket, it's a key. A key to something dark and ancient. He told me that the family who had owned the locket had used it to summon a powerful entity, a being of pure evil that dwelled in the shadows between worlds. He said that the locket was a conduit for this entity, a way for it to enter our world. He told me that the only way to stop it was to destroy the locket, but he warned me that it wouldn't be easy. The locket was protected by powerful magic. It would resist any attempt to destroy it. He gave me a few instructions. He told me to gather certain herbs and minerals to perform a specific ritual. He said that it was the only way to break the locket's hold on Sarah and prevent the entity from fully manifesting. I spent the rest of the night gathering the materials Arthur had told me about. It was like something out of a bad occult movie. I felt ridiculous, but I was desperate. The next morning, I found Sarah. She was in the old family cemetery on the outskirts of town. She was standing in front of a crumbling mausoleum, surrounded by a circle of stones. She was wearing the locket and her eyes were closed. She was chanting again, her voice stronger this time. The air around her crackled with energy. I could feel a presence, a dark and malevolent force that was growing stronger with each passing moment. I knew I had to act fast. I started the ritual following Arthur's instructions. I lit the herbs, scattered the minerals, and began to chant the words he had taught me. At first, nothing happened. But then the air grew colder. The wind picked up, howling through the trees. The stones around Sarah began to glow with an eerie light. Sarah's chanting grew louder, more frantic. Her body started to tremble. The locket began to vibrate, pulsing with a dark energy. I could feel the entity trying to break through to fully possess Sarah. I knew that if it succeeded, there would be no turning back. I focused all my energy on the ritual. I chanted louder, more forcefully. I could feel the magic flowing through me, burning in my veins. The locket started to crack. A thin line appeared on its surface, spreading like a spiderweb. Sarah screamed, a high-pitched piercing sound that echoed through the cemetery. The entity was weakening. I could feel its grip on Sarah loosening. I knew I had to finish it. I reached out and grabbed the locket. It was burning hot, searing my skin, but I held on tight. I slammed the locket against the mausoleum again and again. The silver heart shattered into pieces. Sarah collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The dark energy dissipated. The wind died down. The cemetery fell silent. I knelt beside Sarah, checking her pulse. She was alive, but barely. Her skin was cold and clammy. Her breathing was shallow. I scooped her up in my arms and carried her back to the house. I called 911. Sarah spent a week in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain what had happened. They said she was suffering from severe exhaustion and dehydration. They said she might have had some kind of psychotic episode. I didn't tell them about the locket or the curses or the dark magic. They wouldn't have believed me. Sarah eventually recovered. She doesn't remember much about what happened. She remembers feeling tired and stressed, but she doesn't remember the nightmares or the sleepwalking or the chanting. She doesn't remember the locket. We still live in the house in Havenwood, but things are different now. Sarah is more withdrawn, more cautious. She jumps at sudden noises. She has trouble sleeping. I'm different too. I'm no longer a skeptic. I've seen things that I can't explain, things that have shaken my faith in logic and reason. I still have the pieces of the locket. They're locked away in a safe in the basement. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know if they are still dangerous. Sometimes at night I hear whispers. Faint, almost imperceptible whispers, like someone is trying to talk to me from another room. I don't know what they're saying, but I know they are there, and I know that the darkness is still out there, waiting.